Hi everyone, this is Karolis Vyšniauskas, a writer and editor at Nauja Journalism Collective here in Vilnius. It's been a while since we released new podcast episodes, but we've been doing a lot of work behind the scenes, building new projects. And one of them is starting right now, right here. Let me back up a bit. I'm a longtime music fan. I started doing music journalism around 2008. I interviewed local bands, wrote music reviews, went to hundreds of shows, and I loved it all. Music was there in the moments when I was the happiest, and in the moments when I was the saddest. And for a long time, I wanted to talk about music in Nauja podcast as well. I did that on several occasions, but it was never a systemic thing. But starting today, it is. We are launching a new podcast series, Nauja podcast spin-off called Nauja scena, or The New Scene, when we'll have episodes in English, like the one you're hearing right now. Why are we doing this? Well, I believe that in the last 10 to 12 years, the Lithuanian music scene experienced many positive changes. There is a wave of new artists, new visions, and those artists who have been around for some time, they are releasing some of their best work right now. In this series, I will be talking with artists and the music scene people here in Lithuania to try to make sense of it all. And for the first interview, I want to introduce you to someone who is responsible for many recent positive changes in the Lithuanian music scene. His name is Snorre Bergerud. Snorre is a founder of YMIR audio recording studio here in Vilnius. He's a producer, artist, and also a great friend who I've known almost since his first days in Vilnius. In the music scene in Vilnius, Snorre became almost like a mythical figure. He's very influential as a producer, and the artists who work with him, they really love him. I've heard that from many artists who were at YMIR audio. But Snorre never shows his face on social media. He almost never does interviews. So people have heard of him, but never had a chance to actually meet him. So I hope that this interview will feel like that kind of a meeting. We talked about the origins of the studio and different artists who recorded their music here. And we went quite deep into the philosophy of why music matters, especially in this day and age. Snorre is Norwegian, and I think his outsider perspective on things here in Lithuania is very valuable to hear. We spoke for 3 hours. I cut the interview down a bit, but it's gonna be a long journey. But I promise you, it is worth your time. Our conversation was recorded on the 5th of July. Let's hear it. Hi, Snorre.
Hi, Karolis.
Where are we now?
We are in my studio in LRT.
This place, I've been here, I think, for the first time around like 2011, 2012. And when I look back at the history of the music that was made here, that you produced and you worked with different artists, there's lots of records that became one of my favorites. For example, everything that Frank Fitz released, No Real Pioneers, Crucial Features, Junior A as well, Emilija Karosaitė, Monique, Jautì, Garbanotas, I think 3 or 4 of their latest albums, and many, many more. They were made in this basement that we are now. So
Yes,
I'm glad we're here, and I'm glad we're talking, because in this all of this time, you gave like one interview. Mm-hmm. Is that correct?
I think so. I can only remember one.
Why?
Now.
But why?
Why I only did that one interview?
Yeah.
Well, no one really asks to interview me. That is why. And I don't tend to approach people and ask them to interview me. So
yeah,
that's why.
So let's start from the beginning. So can you tell, how did you start writing music, producing music, and how did your music journey led you to here to Vilnius, Lithuania?
I played violin when I was small. I don't remember why. I'm guessing my mom thought it would be a good idea for me to play the violin. So I started playing when I was 5. And then I played for 5 years. And then when I was 10, I saw a Metallica video on MTV. And I thought that was the coolest thing I had ever seen. And I thought, I need to do that. And it was clear to me in my 10-year-old head that I could not do that with a violin. So I had to get a guitar. I borrowed a guitar from the neighbor. And I sat down and I learned how to play it on my own. And my father said that if I learned how to play properly, he would give me a guitar for my birthday next time. So for my 11th birthday, I got a guitar and an amp. And then I sort of convinced my best friends in school to start a band with me. Okay. So I picked basically my 2 best friends, and I said, like, you have to play bass and you have to play drums. And clearly I'm going to play guitar since I already have a guitar. And so then I started playing in bands. And then I did that. That was my main hobby. And as I got older, I joined other bands, started other bands, and it just continued like that. Without any clear purpose. I just, I loved making music and being in bands, and that was it. And then one band that I was in got signed, and we were gigging quite a lot. And at some point, I felt that the style of music I was doing, which was, I played mostly in metal and punk bands.
This is She Said Destroy, Snorre's metal band in Norway. The song you're hearing is called This City Speaks in Tongues. Throughout the interview, I will add short clips from the records we are talking about.
Basically, my teenage years and early 20s, that's what I was doing. And at some point, I felt like that's it. I don't feel like I have anything more that I can do in this genre, and I wanted to try something new. So I applied for a school called LIPA. It's a university in Liverpool, just for a popular music bachelor. And I got in, so I sold basically everything I owned in terms of music gear and moved there. Started over again just to do different types of music. And that was really cool. I really enjoyed it. And while I was there, I met my girlfriend, Rasa, who is Lithuanian.
Yeah.
And after I graduated, we were thinking of where to go, and we decided to try out Lithuania for a bit. And we ended up staying. So that's, and like my transition from from playing music to producing music was mostly just me not being happy about. I was always interested in recording. I always wanted to know, why do some records sound better to me than others, but I didn't really know the answers. I was just curious about it. And then as I started playing in more serious bands, I started making demos at home. I started recording at home, got a bit better at it. And at some point, when we started recording in more like professional studios with my bands, I became this irritating client that knows what he wants, but he doesn't know how to get it. So I would just constantly be in the engineer's ear about, like, can we do this? Can we do that? Can the snare drum be more like that and that and that? And I realized after a couple of albums that either I'm going to be annoying forever or I need to learn how to do this myself. So I started, getting more and more into production. And when I got to the point where I started liking my own productions, other people liked them too. So they would ask me maybe if I could do something for them. And I just got into production more that way. And it's sort of, this coincided with me realizing that I enjoyed the process of making the music and recording the music more than I maybe liked performing it live. I like being on stage. I like playing live. I like the energy of playing with other people, but there's a lot of other things that come along with playing live that I just don't enjoy at all. Like basically everything that isn't just the playing. Like,
you mean like traveling,
eating in gas stations,
food.
Like all of this kind of like just hanging out with people who are drunk, just like all of that stuff. I've always been in bands with people that I liked spending time with, So, going on road trips with those people, I always enjoyed. But, all of these other things, everyone who's in a band knows what I'm talking about, I guess. You get to a place, you have to deal with all of the load in, load out, sound checks, waiting, backstage food, toilets that aren't really toilets for human beings, all of that stuff that it's kind of okay when you're 18, but you get more and more tired of it. And then parallel to that, I started really enjoying production, so I just transitioned more and more into that.
You mentioned this music school in Liverpool. At some point, it was pretty well known in Lithuania because
Really?
A history, this whole history from Lithuanian side was that Rasa, your girlfriend, was a winner of a big reality TV show here, and the studies in this Liverpool music school was like this is what she got because she won the contest. And
that's true.
And I remember Lithuania was saying that, this is like a Paul McCartney's music school. I don't know what's his role in, but that's how it was promoted.
He actually, he founded that school, and he is like the patron of the school. And surprisingly, he's not involved in it on a day-to-day level, but he's the one that hands out all the diplomas every year, for example, when he can.
Okay. So you actually met him when you got your diploma?
I didn't go there to get the diploma.
Okay.
We didn't bother to go back just for the diplomas because we had already moved.
Oh, you were in Lithuania already?
Yeah, but no, actually at that time I think we were in Norway. But for example, Rasa studied songwriting. I did not study that. She had a songwriting module. And part of that module was that she actually had a private songwriting lesson with Paul McCartney. So that is pretty cool.
Oh, yeah.
I would say. At least it is if you think Paul McCartney is cool. Yeah, he's quite involved in the school still. Well, I don't know how it is now, but back then he was.
Okay, so you both finish your studies in Liverpool.
Yes.
And then you decide to move to Vilnius, Lithuania, and you start building your studio here.
No, well, so we were in a band together. We started a band together while we were in uni. We met through making music together, basically. And so since Rasa was a famous person here in Lithuania, we would get offers to come here and play. And so we would go here in the summer, like when we had the summer break from uni, we would come here to play some concerts and so on. And while doing that, it became pretty evident that, let's say that the potential of the Lithuanian music scene wasn't exactly realized at that time. There was a lot that could be done here, is what we thought. That's what I thought. And it didn't seem to me like anyone had a good studio, for example. I'm sure I will insult someone by saying this, but that's what it looked like. And so we thought that let's move here and let's try for a year, And we found these premises that I'm in now, and they seemed like, the room sounds great, and we were just really lucky to find it. Moved in here, started recording people, and it went really quite well almost from the beginning. And so we stayed for another year, and yeah. Yeah,
can you name some of those studio moments that made you realize, okay, this is actually going according to plan? Because from listeners' perspective, we saw the band Rasa Basa was, I think, a very loved band here in Lithuania. Everyone loved Rasa, everyone loved the sound because it was very unique comparing to what other bands were doing. You had a lot of these like dream pop, shoegazy elements.
This is Arrows by Rasa Basa, Snorre and Rasa's band in Vilnius.
Then at some point the band kind of stopped.
Well, yeah,
I went to hiatus, I guess. But the studio work, it never stopped.
Yeah, so the studio work, because the studio work started taking over a lot. That started taking over the time more and more. And it was very difficult at that time. Like, this is, 10, 12 years ago.
Yeah.
And at that time, things still aren't working great in the Lithuanian music industry, but they're working way better than they were back then. It was really, really hard then to do something that wasn't just, pop music.
Yeah.
If you didn't do that, there weren't any venues to play in almost. And just all these practical things that you need in terms of when you're playing a concert, they just weren't there. There was no infrastructure for playing that type of music. And so we got to the level where we felt like, okay, this is kind of the effort that we would have to put in to continue doing that it just seemed like too much. And then in parallel with that, we had the studio, and the studio started going well. And so we just transitioned into doing more and more of that.
When you say the studio was going well, do you remember some records, some artists that you worked for that that were really like foundational for you to feel, okay, we can do something in Vilnius, like this is actually going according to a plan?
Well, I remember always thinking that there was loads of really talented musicians here, but there always seemed to be this huge gap between the artists that were popular and the artists that were good. Because there would be loads of talented young musicians that they seemed interesting to me, like their music seemed interesting to me, but it didn't seem like it had anywhere to go at that time. And then, you had artists that were big, but they just, I didn't think their music was that interesting, let's say. But then something started changing a little bit. I remember that, I think for me, the first record where I felt like this seems to be going more into the mainstream was when I did the first album that I produced for Freaks on Floor. That album was really quite popular for that time.
I think it's called Waves, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
And that was the first album that I worked on where I felt that we did now a sound that the band really wanted to do without worrying if it's pop enough. And people still seem to like it on a level where the band can actually, make some sort of living from it. It seemed like the underground and what was popular started connecting a bit more around that time. Not because of that album, of course, but just around that time, it seemed like there was more of a platform for bands who were playing music that they were more interested in playing. And then since that time, I guess we're talking the last 6 or 7 years, there have been just like moments where music that I actually like is also popular.
This is interesting.
Garbanotas, sorry to interrupt you, but for example, Garbanotas is another one of those bands that they have been around forever. And they were just like an underground band that was like really good, but they had their little following and that was it. And at some point they went from being that band to now being a band that is, Garbanotas is one of those bands that it seems like almost everyone likes. I don't think I've ever heard anyone say that they hate Garbanotas. And, so they went from being a very small band to just being quite big.
Interesting what you said about this Waves album by Freaks on Floor, because I think there's a kind of rock that album is that direction that album was going to, for example, bands like, I don't know, Foo Fighters, that kind of stuff, where they are very popular bands. And in Lithuania, it seems that rock bands cannot be popular. They have to be, quote unquote, alternative, underground, meaning that they are not popular. Yeah. And it almost became like a badge of honor that, oh, I'm not part of mainstream. And it seems that you never bought it. This like, which is kind of interesting, because if you grew up in Norway in the metal scene, I assume this part of being some kind of counterculture underground movement, it's part of the ethos. But you
you don't seem to be buying it. I'm curious to hear more about that.
It just didn't seem logical to me that in every other Western country, you have people making a living from their music, even though that music isn't necessarily mainstream. They might not be making as much money as the people who are playing arenas and stadiums, but they're making a comfortable living. And it just didn't seem to me like Lithuania, for some reason, should be this unique market where only, pop music could be popular, or electronic music, which was the thing, So I just felt that sooner or later this is going to, people who play whatever they want to play, they're going to have their moment sooner or later. And that is happening now. You have quite a lot of artists in Lithuania now who play music that is not, let's say, conventionally mainstream, but it's still very popular. And of course it is like that, because why wouldn't it? Like, I remember that there was a lot of these sort of cliches that I kept hearing over and over again when I moved here. And it would be stuff like, yeah, but in Lithuania, it's not like this. Or in Lithuania, this will not happen. Or Lithuanians don't like this. Or Lithuanians only like shit. Or, there was a lot of this extremely pessimistic views of the Lithuanian music scene. And then there was also this thing that was especially popular to say, where people would say that, yeah, it's good enough for Lithuanians. Or it's like, yeah, but it's good for Lithuania. Like, this artist, for Lithuania, it's pretty good. And that people would somehow hold Lithuanian music up at, they would hold it at a lower standard than they would hold everything else.
Yeah.
And that always seemed to me like a really destructive way of thinking. And I hear much less of that now, which is good, of course.
I know that your final thesis that you did for your university was also focused on Lithuania
it was.
As a case study. So now we have more than 10 years that passed after you wrote that thesis. And really, if you want to kind of capture those changes that happened, that your studio helped to make those changes happen, I'm curious to understand where the Lithuanian music scene is right now compared to where it was when you came here, because there are different ways to look at it. For example, all these records that I mentioned before, I think they are great, and I think they wouldn't have happened without your collaboration and without this place being established in Vilnius. On the other hand, lots of these bands are no longer playing, like bands like Frankfurt, like Crucial Features, No Real Pioneers. I'm not sure where they are all, and others at their parts of their careers now. So it seems that we know now we can make better records, but it seems that the industry to sustain artists' careers, it's still not really there. So that will be one of the observations. But I'm curious to hear more what we achieved as a music scene and what are we still lacking.
What struck me when I came here was that there didn't seem to be like a gradual. What I grew up in Norway, and then I spent some years in the UK, and compared to those two countries, Lithuania didn't seem to have much of a. It was either completely underground or it was like pop, and that was it. There didn't seem to be like a gradual climb between those two levels. And so if you were a band that you could play in front of 50 people, and use, buckets instead of drums, or you could play Siemens Arena or Loftus or these types of, that would seem to be it. You had Tamsta, but even the people who played there at that time, for me, they seemed like they were more like established acts. So there wasn't really any infrastructure for like younger artists to have somewhere to climb through. And now there is. And that, of course, is hugely important. It also seemed to me that in terms of management and in terms of like the business side of things, it was very, very primitive at that time. It still is quite primitive, but it's better now, it seems to me. There are more people who genuinely want to do something good. Some of them are more qualified than others, but it seems like they have more good intentions at least. Whereas when we came here, I felt like the people who were music managers at that time, they were people who, they could be selling used cars, or they could be doing something else that they would be selling, but they just happened to end up in the music industry, and that's what they were doing. And they did it in a way that I perceived as being quite shady. Of course, the music industry and music managers and the idea of the music business in general is, it has a pretty bad reputation all over the world. But here it seemed to have an extra layer of Sovietic influence that was particularly bad for the musicians. And that seems to have changed for the better quite a lot. And, you have bands like, as we talked about earlier, you have bands like Garbanotas who can now comfortably play in relatively large venues while still doing their own thing. They can play in front of a lot of people. Now you have someone like Monique who has been around for a long time, and she's always done her own thing, and her own thing is very unique to her. It's impossible to confuse Monique for anyone else. And she's become very, very popular doing exactly that. She built herself up from, being a very small artist to being now a very big artist, and without compromising her own music. And this is, a huge change. Of course, being a foreigner and not having been around here for that long, I might be getting my facts wrong, but it seems to me like a lot of Lithuanians were absolutely convinced that everything is way better elsewhere. And
I can assure you that that's exactly
yeah.
what
And then
was.
everyone went somewhere. A lot of people went. People would go to London. They would go to wherever to study or to work, and being somewhere else. That's also something I remember from when I moved here. That if someone had been in London, they were like, "Ooh, he lives in London." That was like a big, he went to, he studied in London, or he lives in London. He only comes here to play concerts, but he actually lives in London. That was like a big deal. Like you were somehow better if you were not based in Lithuania. And, that was also reflected in everyone sang in English. Everyone wanted to sing in English around that time. And then something changed. And I think people started coming back, and I think people started maybe realizing that maybe things aren't as fantastic as we thought they were in all these other countries. Maybe things aren't, from a creative point of view, maybe things aren't as bad as we thought they were in Lithuania. And maybe it's not terribly lame to sing in Lithuanian either. And some shift happened where people now seem to be more proud of singing in Lithuanian. They are proud of being in Lithuania as opposed to being ashamed of it and wanting to get away from it, which is how it seemed like it was some years back.
Yeah. I'm curious why did that, where is that coming from? Because you can also see that as a kind of almost like a nationalistic move, Lithuania, now we're going to be proud of it. But it's not exactly that. It's more that people maybe get more they are more confident in themselves, and maybe we as community are becoming more confident in our own.
I think it's a lot better that people are proud of being Lithuanian than being ashamed of being Lithuanian. And a lot of the time, that's what I got from people when we first moved here. People wouldn't ask me oh, so you moved to Lithuania, why? They would be like, why are you here? Are you crazy? People would talk to me as if I was an insane person.
Especially compared to Norway, because Norway was always so there are places like London, there are places, I don't know, like Spain, where people from Lithuania would move to work.
Yeah.
But Scandinavia is on a different level.
Yeah.
It's almost unbelievable. I remember my first time going to Copenhagen. I think that was the first Scandinavian city I visited, and the prices, the difference between prices was just insane. I know I have friends who went to Roskilde Festival in 2005, and they couldn't buy a sandwich there because it's just the difference was just crazy. So. You coming not only from a foreign country, but coming from Norway, which even among Scandinavian countries, I assume, I think it's the richest one. So it's quite a thing, right?
Yeah. But for example, what I felt in Norway was that because Norway is such a rich country, and because everything is comfortable in Norway, it also didn't seem like you had any reason to do something, because you could try to make the best album in the world and dedicate everything you have to making the best album in the world, and try to make a living that way, or you could just basically do nothing and make a living that way, because, nothing's going to go wrong because you're in Norway. I think that Norway is a very, very good country to be in for most people, because no matter if you're rich or poor, if you're healthy or not healthy, if you're young, if you're old, you're safe there. And from a political perspective, I think that that's the goal of a country, is to make everybody safe, regardless of what kind of resources they may or may not have. But from a creative point of view, living in such comfort isn't necessarily that great. And this is not something I thought of when I left Norway, but it is something that I thought of when I started living in the UK, first of all, and then later when I came to Lithuania. Obviously, there were things that were not working as well as I was used to in Lithuania. But people were aware of those things, and they really wanted to change those things. And for me, it has always been inspiring to see this change for the better every year. Because, during the time that I've lived here, I would say that more or less everything has gotten better. Like, people's standard of living seems to have gotten a lot better. People's levels of happiness have gotten better. The industry that I'm in, like the music industry, has certainly gotten a lot better. And watching this positive development is, of course, inspiring. Whereas in Norway, it's like every time I go to Norway on holiday, it's the same. Everything is just the same. It doesn't get necessarily worse. It doesn't get better. It's just the same. Which, as I said, that's very good for most people who are just wanting to have their lives. But from a creative perspective, I'm not sure that that's a good thing.
Yeah, it's almost you don't have anything to fight for. There's you need some kind of
you need some sort of motivation.
Yeah,
and clearly there are artists in Norway that are good artists and so on, and they are obviously motivated to do something. But compared to the amount of resources that are available to them, and compared to the amount of incentive that there is from the government, compared to how much, when you go to school in Norway, basically you have instruments just thrown at you. It's like, do you want to play guitar? Here's your rehearsal room. Do you want to make a record? Here's money. Like, there's so many resources available to you in Norway if you want to do something creative, compared to how it is in other countries, that the number of actual successful artists from Norway is relatively small, I would say. And then if you compare it to Sweden, because the Swedes are way, way better at anything related to music, the number isn't that impressive in Norway. I wouldn't say so. And I think a lot of that has to do with just how comfortable it's been there for a long time.
Yeah. One thing I also want to talk about is your role as a producer. I feel like it's a very new concept in Lithuanian music scene compared to what I grew up with. If I saw a word producer, like producers, it usually meant a manager, and it meant that if you are working with a producer, you're not talented on your own, that you need someone to work with you. And the word producers would be associated with those artists that now we call like industry plants. A lot of like these pop, like girl bands would be seen, oh, so it's just a producer thing. They are not real artists. This is just basically thing created to take money. This is not real music. This is not good music. And now we are in a different world. Like someone like Steve Albini died recently, and he didn't call himself a producer, but now people are more aware of people like him, or like Rick Rubin, other like famous producers in the history of rock music. So I see you was coming more from like that tradition. But it's interesting that in Lithuania, we don't really have that tradition, at least to my understanding. I'm curious, how do you see that? When you came here and say, okay, I'll produce your music, how did people react? Did you feel like you need to kind of defend the profession of a music producer?
No, it just seemed like, well, as you said, there didn't seem like there was much of a... There seemed to be two types of people who had production jobs here, and it would be either someone who would just record bands. They wouldn't necessarily produce them. They would just be engineers, essentially. They would record your band and they would mix the sound, and that would be it. Or there would be someone who would work with more electronic music or urban music, and they would, make beats and everything, but they were beat makers. Let's call them. And that was the two different ways of doing things. I do elements of both of those things, but the way that I produce, at least I imagine, the way that I imagine that I produce is a little bit more similar to the type of producers that I grew up hearing about, let's say. A lot of what I see as production is not just getting the sound, but it's also trying to get the best out of the artist, whatever that is, and that means that you have to get to know the artist. You have to help the artist. If the artist doesn't already understand what they want, you have to help them figure that out somehow. What I usually say to new clients is that my job is to find out where they are at right now, who they are right now, and just to find out where they want to be. And the distance between those 2 points, that's my job. And, sometimes people, they come to me and they know exactly what they want. They say, like, this is what we want, can you do it? And then it's clear, that's my job. Other times people come to me and they would say that they don't like where they are at the moment. They have songs, but they don't know exactly where they want to take those songs. And then my job becomes, helping them to find out what that is. And then we can get to that next point. And this type of production, to me, it seemed like there wasn't much of that going on when I first came here. I'm not saying I was the only one that did it, but I wasn't aware of anyone else doing that type of production at that time.
Do you remember some examples of artists that you felt that this vision of, okay, a person comes to you, you talk, you know where they want to go, and you feel like, okay, we actually achieved it the way we wanted to. Maybe there are some records, some ideas that you implemented together with the artists that you're very proud of. I'm curious if we get to more like a concrete examples level, because in this studio, lots of people have been here, lots of things happen here. I'm curious to learn more about that.
Records that I'm proud of.
Yeah.
Because we achieved, well, I am really happy with all of those Garbanotas albums that we did. Especially the second one I did with them, I really liked. I felt like the first album I did with them, I don't remember the names of these albums, by the way. You probably remember them, but I don't.
Yeah.
No, I remember the first album I did with them was called Room for You.
Yeah.
And I remember really liking what they did. I really liked the music. And I remember thinking afterwards, listening to it, I was thinking like, now I feel like I get more what they were looking for, but I didn't get it at the time as well as I wanted to. And then when we made the second album I did with them, which is the one that came out after that, and I don't remember what it's called, I feel like on that album, we really nailed it. Mm-hmm. Because I think I really understood what they were trying to achieve, and I think we achieved it for that time. Now I would have done it better, I like to think, but at that time I really think we achieved it, and they were very happy with it. At least they told me they were very happy with it. And so that is one album that immediately springs to mind as an example of where I thought like we really got that right.
That album by Garbanotas is called Paskutinė Saulė. Here is a song called Liūdnos akys.
Kam pažadėjai pakilti, žinai, juk žemė rasi tu. Kam pažadėjai pamilti, bijai, juk vėl prarasi tu. Man
also working with, all of the records that we did with Frank Fitz, I was very happy with at that time. I still think they sound cool.
Yeah, they always were ahead of their time, because now when you look at rock music landscape right now, there's a lot of this more aggressive, more like 90s inspired sound. And you did that, I think the first Frank Fitz EP was like in 2016 or 2017.
Probably, yeah.
And to me then they felt very like LA, very like, it seemed like, wow, these guys are from Vilnius. And they were very young at that time.
Yeah, very.
Chasing you forever, I'm leaving it all behind.
They contacted me. I remember they reached out to me, and they wanted to record with me. And I remember from the message that they wrote to me, I don't know which one of them wrote it, but I remember thinking that this sounds like a very, very. It sounds like a child wrote this. Basically, so I was quite skeptical about the message. But then, when they sent me the actual song, I was really impressed, because they were really good players. And at that time, I hadn't heard any young musicians here who could play at that level or who could write songs at that level. And that was just, I remember thinking that was a lot of fun, because the majority of the sound of a record comes from the band, really. Like, if you want a good drum sound, the main ingredient is a good drummer. If you want a good guitar sound, the main ingredient is a good guitar player. This sounds like a cliche until you experience the difference between these things. So I remember when I heard their music, I remember thinking that this requires, like, this would sound so good if it had a specific, let's say, sonic quality to it. And then when they actually came to the studio and I placed microphones in front of them, it just sounded exactly like it should, because they produced that sound from themselves. And my job was just to,
capture.
Yeah, just to capture it, basically. And that was really enjoyable. I really liked working with them. And it was similar with Garbanotas. Garbanotas sounds like Garbanotas. I don't know if you've heard their latest album.
Yeah,
I really like how that turned out too. And that also is just, they're just great players. They write really great music. They arrange the music really well. And it's just, my job is just to capture it as good as possible. And I help out with, things in the sense that they will send me their demos. Like how I always worked with Garbanotas, for example, is that they will send me their demos. I listen to the demos and I make some suggestions, but those suggestions aren't going to be, like, hey, I wrote a riff, play this instead. It's more like, okay, maybe the tempo is a bit too slow. Maybe the song is a bit long. Maybe this chorus part here is really great. Are you sure you don't want to repeat that more than one time? Like that. So it's just like broad strokes, let's say. And those types of albums are always, I really enjoy those albums where where it's clear, what needs to be done with this artist. And then if you manage to achieve that, then it's, of course, very satisfying.
At some point, our conversation took a left turn and we moved away from the Lithuanian music scene things and started talking about the meaning of making music and the meaning of talking about it. I felt that this part is important to hear for everyone who is creating something, not necessarily music. Let's hear it.
I make music because I really like doing it. And I always tell to my clients, and they're forced to listen because they're already in the same room as me. They have to listen to me tell them that basically what I firmly believe, unless your only goal is to be popular and earn money, I think that what you have to do is that you have to make something that you yourself enjoy. You have to make something that you like yourself. Because if you don't do that, and no one else likes it either, then you've basically made something pointless. You've made something you're not happy with and no one else is interested. So what did you do then? The only thing that you can control when you make something is that you like it, that you're happy with it. And then when you send it into the world, It could become a massive hit or it could become nothing.
Yeah.
But at the very least, you spent your time creating something that you like. And I don't see any better way to spend your time. Like, I think of it in this way also, that most people don't have a hobby if they're older than, 30. Most people don't have a hobby at all in general. And if they do, no one else is interested in it. Like, no one gives a shit if you're mountain biking. No one wants to like watch a video of you mountain biking or kite surfing or skateboarding or whatever you do when you're, if you decide to get into painting, no one wants to just sit and watch you paint. Most people do a hobby because they themselves enjoy it. And if anyone finances it, it is themselves. A lot of people, they spend their entire year earning money in a job that they may or may not enjoy so that they can go on holiday. They go to Disneyland once a year, or they go to, Barbados or whatever. And that's what they like. That's what they enjoy the most. And that's the highlight of their year. No one's going to pay them to do that.
They're paying to do that.
no, but like, if you're a musician, you get to do something that not that many people can do, which hopefully you enjoy. That's why you're doing it, I'm guessing. And then if you're lucky, someone might even write to you and say, hey, I really like your song. And if you're really, really lucky, someone might even start giving you money to do what you enjoy doing. They might pay money for a ticket to see you perform it live. So any level of success that you have as a musician, for me, I would already consider it like you're lucky if you have it.
Yeah.
Because no one's going to write you a message and just say like, hey, I saw your picture, I saw you kite surfing the other day and you just looked lovely. People don't do that. It's like, can I come and watch you mountain bike? Like, people don't do that with other people's hobbies. But when you play music, it's a gift to just be able to do it and to like it. And if you're lucky, you might even have people coming to you saying that they enjoy it. So you're already at a huge plus as far as I'm concerned. Because you're lucky that you get to do something that you get a lot of joy from, that, you can do it whenever you want. Does that make sense to you, what I'm saying?
It does.
Because I know that you're not a musician, so I don't know if it's how it sounds to you, but for me, this is the logic that I always try to apply. That this joy from making the music, from playing the music, has to come first.
Yeah. It does make sense. Curious how you compare music to a hobby, because I think a lot of musicians would think that what they're doing is very important. It's important culturally. It's important for a country to have a music scene. That it's that somehow there's something almost sacred about this.
I think that
profession that is not just a regular job. That is. That it's
it's clearly it's not a regular job, but it is something that you do because you enjoy doing it.
Yeah.
And you would most likely do it even if no one paid you to do it. And there's another word for that, which is hobby. Now you can be very good at it. You can be very good at your hobby.
Yeah.
But it's still a hobby until you get to a point where it's no longer a hobby, where you're professional. But for example, the majority of artists, certainly that I grew up listening to, I don't know, I cannot think of any specific examples, but most artists, they were students, or they were graphic designers, or they were electricians or something. They were music teachers, whatever, when they released their first album or their first song. And then that became popular, and that's how we got to know those artists. But at that time when they were doing that, they were doing it on the side, and then they had a day job of some sort, or they were studying or whatever. Now, maybe you don't want to call it a hobby, but what is it? Okay, it's an activity that you do for your own enjoyment. And I don't see anything wrong with that. I think that's like an amazing thing that you get to do that. And then if you're lucky, it goes from being a hobby to becoming your job, if you're really, really lucky.
Yeah, but it is one of the questions that I was thinking about a lot, is that at this particular moment, when you can do a lot of things, basically, and you're thinking how you can be useful. as a person for the society.
Yeah.
You can go do, I don't know, teach someone something. You can go do some social work. You can, I guess I try to justify to myself what's the role of music, how to make it useful, how to justify spending time on it when you're like over 30. That's when you're not a teenager anymore. And now I decided to do a podcast to kind of rediscover Lithuanian music scene. And part of me thinks like, but does it really, like, oh, it's great that there are so many new artists and they somehow express themselves. Maybe it's almost like a new language, how they communicate. We moving forward as a culture somehow. So that's how I justify it. But part of me thinks that maybe there are many other jobs that are quote unquote more useful to society. So like, maybe you don't think about these questions at all. But like, do you have to, do you feel that you're doing something for society, being a music producer, or you don't care about it at all?
I mean, I think that what you just said there are two extremes on one scale. And I don't think I feel like any of those two things.
Yeah.
But I think that, first of all, the wish for what you do to be important to other people and to yourself, I think it's a natural impulse to have, but I don't think it's necessarily a very healthy one.
Yeah.
And I don't think it's an impulse that you should indulge too much. I think that if you do something that you really enjoy, and in the process of doing that, you can also bring joy to some other people, whether it's 10 people or 100,000 people, then I think you are definitely doing something positive in society. Clearly. Now, if I in any way help people spread that joy through their music, then yeah, I am doing something for society, but that is not something that I'm thinking about. This is more like a theoretical exercise to my ears. But I think that the wish to attach too much meaning to what you're doing beyond just really, really liking it, this is not a wish that I have. I don't feel like what I do needs to be important.
But then what it needs to be, like, you still have some criteria for yourself.
Yeah, that I like it.
Okay.
I want to enjoy my time on this planet, and I want to do something that I enjoy. I want the people that I care about to be happy. And then, of course, if I make my clients happy, and if they in turn make other people happy with the music that we produce together, of course, that's a very, very nice thing. That's a very positive thing. And I would like that to happen as much as possible. But I don't think that anyone does any creative work really unless they enjoy it themselves. And I think that if you cannot enjoy your creative work unless someone else tells you that it's good, then that's a problem, I think. And you need to learn how to judge what you're doing on your own rather than reach for other people's confirmation, let's say. I don't think that... I'm not saying that it's... I'm not criticizing that wish. I'm just saying that it is not something that I think it is healthy to actively follow.
Yeah. No, I agree with that. Maybe where I was going with this question is, like, for example, you when the war in Ukraine started, you made this song together with other artists that was like a fundraiser song. So I feel like this is an example of how you use your music skills to some kind of bigger cause. But I feel like with music, in a lot of ways, it's you making it because, as you said, because you like it, and you kind of make it. You kind of need to make it for yourself in order to be really good, to be unique. Because if you're trying to do something for other people, then You don't know what's going to happen. So it can feel like somehow narcissistic or very self-indulgent, the process of creating music.
Yeah, but it is, of course.
And I guess my question is, when you can do a lot of things that are more like focused on like society at large, why should you do music? But I feel like music plays a role in like these changes. We talked about changes in Lithuania, right? I feel like music plays a role in those changes. I feel like as a journalist, for example, I can write an article and create some kind of impact, but I feel someone like, I don't know, even Garbanotas releasing an album that really somehow reflects the sound of Vilnius today. It's part of the same it's just like a different language. That's how I justify it. But I'm curious how do you see that as
well, I don't really feel like I have to I know that you're not asking me to do that, but I don't really feel like I need to justify how I spend my time just because I think that
I mean, not to others, just to yourself.
No. Yeah,
to yourself.
I understand that.
Yeah.
But what other purpose could there be in doing something than finding some sort of enjoyment from it?
Yeah.
And if that, like, I mean, you can call it meaning, you can call it enjoyment, but
yeah, I guess meaning is the word. Like,
yeah.
What's the meaning of making music?
Yeah, but, okay. I mean, of course, this is now, of course, we can go into a completely different tunnel of questions, but, what's the meaning of doing anything then? Like, what's the meaning of any job, really?
Yeah, that's true.
Or hobby, which is, as I understand, a controversial term. But, none of it has, like, any meaning beyond, every person needs to put food on their table.
Yeah.
So they need some amount of money. And, most people, I think, if you ask people, would you like to have a job that you hate or would you like to have a job that you enjoy? Then I think most people would say, yeah, I would like to have a job that I enjoy.
Yeah.
And so for me, music was always a part of my life. I never questioned it in this way that, I never questioned that I have two hands and 2 feet. It was always there. And I always performed it. I always listened to it. I always, I wouldn't be able to not have it in my life, let's say.
Yeah.
So I consider myself extremely fortunate that I can be around music and make music for a living. And I think that, as I said before, I like to think that the majority of the people who leave this studio after me having made music with them, that they are happy with what we made and that they enjoyed making it. And hopefully that music makes other people feel some sort of joy. I think that is some sort of purpose.
Yeah.
If we are looking for purpose, which I am not really, but since your question is asking about that, I guess that this applies. Now, of course, I don't think there are many people in the world who couldn't answer yes to the question, could you do more for society? Or could you do something more useful with your life? I think the vast majority of people would have to answer, yes, I could definitely do more. I could definitely do something more useful for society or for other people. But I don't think that that's necessarily something that people who do music should ask themselves more than any other human being.
Yeah, that's a good point. Like, I wonder why does this question comes from me to talking to you as a producer. If you would be some, I don't know,
carpenter.
Yeah, I know.
Would you ask me that question?
Yeah, I feel like there's something in how musicians and artists in general are seen in like Lithuanian tradition is that it's almost like you can do that as a teenager, as a hobby, right? But to have it as a career, very few people actually have it I would argue in Lithuania, that it's a kind of new thing to have to be a pop, not like pop artist, but in general, like to be an artist as a career and not do anything else on the side. That is a rather unique thing.
Yeah, I guess that this is unique for you as a Lithuanian person. It's not so unique for me as a Norwegian person, just because it is a lot more common in Norway to do something for your own enjoyment.
Yeah.
And there are maybe less restrictions on how you do things and when you do them. For example, in Norway, this may have changed now, but I remember that at least some years ago, the average age of a student in the University of Oslo was 28.
Really?
Yeah. Because people tend to take their time. They want to figure out what they want to do. They don't want to rush. People get married much later in Norway than they get married here. They have children later. I'm not saying this is a good thing or a bad thing. I'm just saying that there seems to be, from my observation as a foreigner, there seems to be a lot more the path that you can choose in Lithuania without being questioned too much by your family or by society is quite narrow. Like that you have, so when you graduate from high school, for example, there's quite a lot of pressure to immediately study something. And then when you graduate at the age of 22, there's quite a lot of pressure to immediately get a job. And if you, don't find a partner by the age of 25, 26, then you should already start sweating a bit in your palms because, you're running out of time. And so I'm aware that not everyone feels this pressure. And I understand that this doesn't apply to every individual person, but there's certainly a lot more of this here than it is in, for example, Scandinavian countries. And so in that type of environment, it is rather logical that people don't prioritize activities that don't seem to have any use,
Yeah.
They don't do something just because they enjoy it. Or if they do, it is something that everybody else does, so they don't question it. Because the people don't think it's a waste of time to go and watch a basketball game here, for example, because everyone does it. Or to go and barbecue something by the lake. Everyone does that too. That wouldn't be considered weird.
Yeah.
But if you're like 38 years old and you're spending your Friday night going to a band rehearsal, then that would be really weird because then it's like, why are you doing that?
Yeah.
It's not your job. So in that sense, I guess there's quite a big difference between where I grew up and how it is here. But I think this is also changing.
Yeah.
And I think that's why you are asking these questions and I am not.
Yeah.
Because I wouldn't even think of it.
Interesting.
I just don't see there's no difference between wanting to spend your money traveling and wanting to spend your money on making music, for example. Because if it's something that gives you meaning, it's something that gives you joy, then what's the difference?
You're listening to the new scene on Nauja Scena, a new podcast series from Nara Collective. I'm your host Karolis Vyšniauskas, and today we are talking with an artist and producer, Snorre Bergerud. In this second part of the interview, I want to focus on specific records that were made in YMIR audio studio.
For this next part, I want to focus on the studio again.
Okay.
And because I really feel that this place, like what happened between these walls, it's...
This sounds horrible.
It does. But what happened here, I think there were many beautiful things because I spoke with you a lot. I spoke with a lot of artists who worked with you. It seems that the studio became more than just a place to record music. It almost became like this place where you can create your own universe. And I want you to reflect on that because I feel like how you work with artists is not only about recording them, but also kind of for them to feel more confident in what they're doing, to feel more free. And the records that comes up from the studio, you can hear that. They experiment more. I can feel, when I listen to an album, for a record, I feel I can say that you worked on it because there are some decisions that are unexpected. Some song structures suddenly are a little bit different than the artist would do in earlier days. There are some unexpected choices that work very well. So now looking back in these more than 10 years while you have a studio, what do you feel like you achieved in in terms of affecting the artists that you work with? And I mean, I guess you were affected by those artists as well. Maybe you changed as a producer, as a human being as well. So I want to learn more about these changes.
Well, in general, I really just try to get whoever I work with to do what they want to do. And that might sound like an obvious thing, but it actually isn't in most cases, because people are quite often afraid to do what they want to do. And instead they do what they think they should do. I think that a lot of musicians have this anxiousness, but I think that maybe in Lithuania there's more of that because of the culture, that, you know, people doing things your own way isn't necessarily encouraged here, I don't think. Or at least it wasn't. I don't know how it is now, but I don't think it was. So a lot of what I talk to my clients about, and a lot of what I try to push them to do, is to do what makes them to do what they actually want to do, regardless of how it might be perceived by others later. Because they might, for example, there's been quite a lot of things, there's quite a lot of moments on records where we, like a singer will sing something that sounds really cool and they are really excited about it, but then they're going to go, oh no, but we cannot do that. People aren't going to like that. And then I will then, for example, try to encourage them to keep it because it made them excited. So I like to think that with some of my clients, I have maybe made them a little bit more confident in going their own way rather than doing what they think is expected of them. I try to, as much as possible, not put my preferences into their heads, because I don't think that is... people don't want to hear me. They want to hear the artist. And so the more I can make an artist sound like themselves, the better it is, in my opinion. And the less you can hear me, the better it is. Now, of course, on some records that I do, you can hear more of what I do, and on some records you can hear less of it, because it depends on how strong each individual artist's identity is. And of course, it also depends on what they want. I've had situations where people come to me and they say, well, you did this record for this band or this artist, and we would like you to do the same for us. And then, of course, that's naturally going to sound similar to something else that I did. But usually I try to get people to follow their own instincts as much as possible. I think that's maybe the primary thing that I do. I mean, it's not really like a philosophy. It's more like it's like a guiding, it's like a guiding suggestion that I try to give to people. If you have specific artists or albums or projects in mind, I can talk more about them.
Definitely. Yeah. Like, I feel like for a lot of people, when they see the studio first, because there was a video of it, was when No Real Pioneers recorded their song, Another Day to Fall, I think it was called. And it had that very nice guitar riff in the beginning. Maybe we can talk about how did you meet the band, and how did all that recording session came about?
Well, actually, so I met them because Lucas, the drummer, he wanted to sell us a snare drum. So he put, I don't remember if we put an ad out looking for drum gear or if he had put an ad out selling that snare drum, but he came to the studio with that snare drum. And we were testing it and we got to talking about music and he said that he has a band. And I think I asked him to hear the band. He showed it to me and it was really cool. So I offered to record them. That's how that came about, actually. We met because he sold us a snare drum, which I think he regrets still to this day because it's one of the best snare drums we have. And he sold it to us for like a comical price, which was actually the price that it was listed as being worth. Like it was something like 300 litas or something ridiculous like that. And that's what it was worth according to eBay.
Wow.
But we ended up using that snare drum on like, I don't know. That snare drum has been on the Frank Fitz album we did, like that their full album. It was one of the main snare drums on that Freaks on Floor album that I did, the first one. It was one of the main snare drums on all of the Garbanotas albums that I've done. That snare drum has been all over. So Lucas is, I think that's one of his deepest regrets. But that's how that came about.
Okay.
The thing is that in the beginning, I was working more with like foreign artists. Like I had a band called Barbaros here, for example.
Yeah.
Which is a UK band, and I really enjoyed working with them. And we also posted a video with them playing live in the studio around the same time. This would have been 2013 or 2014. And I cannot remember if that video attracted artists to come here in Lithuania or how it was exactly. But I remember doing that, and then around the same time, in 2015, I mixed an album for a Norwegian band. And that band won a Norwegian, well, it would be similar to like a Grammy, like a Norwegian Grammy, let's call it, for Best Pop Album.
What band was that?
They were called Bow to Each Other. And that was also something that I remember raised my visibility a little bit. And then around the same time, I started working with Freaks on Floor. So yeah, those are let's say some of the earliest moments that were like significant, I think, in the studio's history. Speaking of Norwegian pioneers, that's also in general because the music that they play or played was really quite close to the music that I used to play when I was younger. So that was a lot of fun to do those albums. I still really like their EP. It's something that I would still think, you know, sometimes when you, as a producer, when you listen back to stuff that you did at the beginning of your career, or in my case, at the beginning of having this studio, some of the stuff that I listen back to, I think, oh, that doesn't sound quite as good as I would want it to. But when I listen to that EP, I really like it. It's one of the earliest things that I did where I feel like, yeah, that sounds the way I would have done the same thing today, basically.
Nice. Yeah. Renounce, I think it's called.
Yeah,
right?
it is.
Great record. And then there was a band, Crucial Features. They seemed very, very unique because, first of all, because it was all girls band playing punk rock and very, very hardcore punk, which was unexpected.
Yeah.
How did you find each other?
Actually, I saw them in this street music day. They were playing on the street, and it sounded really good. And I approached them and said, like, this sounds fantastic. Do you want to record something? And essentially, they were interested. And so essentially, I remember hearing them and immediately seeing that they are very, very sort of inexperienced musicians, but that they had a lot of potential. So what I told them was that practice for the next 6 months. And then come to my studio and we will record a song for free. And they took that challenge and we recorded their first song, which was called Miršta Sovietinas.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And that was the first thing they recorded. And then we continued working together. We did, I believe, 1 EP and 1 album after that. And they became, I mean, they were fantastic musicians. Kotrina is one of the best drummers, I would say, one of the most talented drummers in the whole scene here. She doesn't play drums anymore, unfortunately, but I remember thinking that she was one of the biggest talents I'd seen. Meda, is a fantastic songwriter. I still work with her. Like we just did a song for Džiugas' album, Džiugas' solo album last year. So that was really fun. She has her own solo project that she's doing.
Yeah,
I don't know if you've heard it, but it's really good.
Yeah,
it's not
Adma.
Yeah. It's not punk music anymore, but it's just very, very good. So all of those girls, they went on to do like just great music. Dorotea from Crucial Features, the bass player, who is not only a very, very good bass player, she played bass on that Freaks on the Floor album, by the way.
Really?
Yeah, she played on one of the songs because she was in the studio to pick something up, or I don't remember, but basically she ended up just playing guest bass on one song, which was really cool. But she's now like an extreme, amongst many other things she's good at, she's an extremely good makeup artist, and she's done the makeup for a bunch of music videos that we've done with other artists. So that was I really like the band, and those girls are just all super talented.
Yeah.
That was also their first few recordings were a bit rough sounding. They sound good, but their album, the final album they did, is also an album that I'm super happy with. It turned out really, really nicely. And you can hear that they're good at playing. Like you can hear that everything is just like a good band playing that type of music, which is always really satisfying to hear.
Another record I want to hear more about is your collaboration with Junior A. I remember when Tautvydas, the singer, and Sindra, the drummer, played together. Their live shows were very... they have very good dynamic between them too. And I feel even though Tautvydas made her music on his own and it was very successful, but like, for example, a song like Violent, I feel like it's one of the best songs released in Lithuania.
Really?
Like for me at least, there's just something in the whole build up and the emotion behind it. I just, maybe just to my taste, but I just really, really enjoyed it. or there was the song called See Through in one of the EPs that has this almost like witch housey kind of chorus to it, and I just never heard those things done in Lithuania, and I feel like with his music it suddenly got very much like it got much more muscly, if that makes sense. Like it's suddenly there are more layers to it. So yeah, that part of your that I think you collaborated on a couple of EPs.
Yes, I think we did.
And Tautvydas now has
3 EPs,
it has a successful solo career, kind of changed his sound completely. But I think that period, it really, I think, was very very high point. What do you remember from that?
I just remember that he contacted me. I don't remember in what context, but he wrote to me and wanted. He asked if I could. He asked if I could mix his EP. And he sent me I might not remember this exactly, but as I remember it, he sent me just a couple of songs as they were at that time, so I would understand what I was going to mix. And I remember that I thought the songs themselves were amazing, because he really is a fantastic songwriter. I remember that the few production ideas that were in there were really, really interesting, but it sounded like very empty and unfinished to my ears. And I told him that I feel like I don't really want to mix this as it is now. I feel like there's something more should be done to it before it's mixed so that it will actually sound finished. So I ended up doing additional production to it.
Yeah.
And then mixing it. And he liked it, so we did more together. We did that first EP, second EP. We did 3 EPs, and then after that he decided to completely abandon that whole project and start over again with FC Baseball. And he did, and that seems to be going really well for him.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm very pleased with, especially that second EP I did with him, which I don't remember what it's called, of course, but it's the one that has see-through on it.
Yeah, I think Super Glue it's called.
Yeah, that's what it's called. Yeah, that one is really great. That's a really, really good EP. I love that. So yeah, that was fun. And, when someone brings you songs that are as well written as his songs are, like melodically and everything, it's just a pleasure to just add to that,
Yeah.
Because it gives you so many ideas, and you don't feel like you have to save the song.
Yeah.
You just feel like you're already given very good ingredients and you can just build on it. And that's always fun when you're a producer.
Another artist and a band that I think associated with the studio is jautì.
Yeah, that's certainly true.
And Džiugas is their lead singer. Maybe he's the person you collaborated the most, I guess.
I think at this point, yeah.
Because they're like
he basically lives here now.
It's like 3 albums by jautì, I think. No, 2 albums.
I did 3 full albums.
Yeah.
And 1 EP and a couple of singles, I guess.
Yeah. And then there's Džiugas solo album.
Yes. 2 solo albums.
2 solo. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, we did the one regular solo album, and then we also did this collaborative solo album that we did last year, where he made songs with different artists, but it's still his album, let's say.
Širdžiai
And jautì seems to. Oh, I remember when they started, someone promoted them as like the first like math rock band in Vilnius, and they had that sound, but then they became something even different. And I was in one of their shows at this Lukiškių kalėjimas, and Džiugas as a frontman, he's just so good at controlling the crowd. He's just very comfortable in that position, and the band also very very powerful behind him. And I feel like it's a different thing than other rock bands are doing here. It's more somehow lighter and more optimistic, more colorful, which I like about them. Curious, what's the story with jautì? How did you find each other?
They actually contacted me, as I understand. This is what they told me anyway. That they contacted me because they really liked Frank Fitz, and they essentially wrote to me and said, "We really like what you did with Frank Fitz, and can you do something like that for us?" That's how that started. So we met up and talked a bit about what they want to achieve and so on and so on. And then we made their first album. They were happy with it. And then we just kept working since then. I don't think there was a plan to just keep working together, but we get along really well as people. I really like them as people. And I seem to be able to keep giving them what they want in terms of the sound. So that's how that went. I remember that the one controversial thing that happened in the beginning when we did their first album was that they were really scared that we were going to put too much distortion on their guitars, because they had this concept in their heads that those math rock guitars that they were familiar with, that they were very, very clean sounding guitars. And I remember explaining to them that if we record something that sounds completely clean, when you put it into the entire mix, it's going to sound just, it's going to sound like Metallica. It's going to have this very heavy metal clean type of sound that they don't really want. And I remember that they were very skeptical throughout the entire recording of that first album, because they thought that I was putting too much distortion on everything. Yeah. Until they heard the final mixes, and then they were like, oh yeah, this is how it should sound. And then they were happy. And after that moment, they trusted me. And so we've had a very good working relationship since then.
I also want to talk about Emilija's EP, the I guess the most recent release you have.
Yes.
And she seems like one of those people that comes from very, like, it's hard to pin down what kind of tradition she's coming from, also because she's very young, but she seems like a very, when we talk about these changes in Lithuania, I guess she seems that kind of artist that couldn't be here, like, I don't know, 12 years ago, but now she somehow embodies lots of good things that happening in the music scene here. So she seems confident, and she seems very confident in what she's doing, and she's doing kind of like the way she sings. Her melodies are very, they kind of melancholic but not depressive. It's there's some kind of some beauty around her music. How did that music reach you, and how did you start working together?
That was actually Džiugas again, because Džiugas and Emilija know each other from a long time ago, and she danced in one of jautì's music videos for the song Mulkis.
Okay.
And one day I guess this is a couple of years ago now, Džiugas sent me a SoundCloud link, and he said, listen to this song, it's really good. And I listened to it, and it really was very good. And I asked, who is this? And he said, it's Emilija, my friend. She's that dancer from that video. And I was like, yeah, okay. And then I listened to it again, and I thought, wow, this really is very good. And so I just reached out to her. I wrote to her, and I said, Džiugas showed me your song. It's fantastic. Do you want to record something together? And she did. And we tried recording that song, the one that she sent to me, the one that Džiugas sent to me. We tried re-recording it. And I remember that it didn't turn out exactly as good as we wanted it to. And then we left it for a bit, and then we started working. And then she wrote another song. And I remember that she wrote to me like, hey, I wrote a new song earlier this evening. Do you want to hear it? And she sent me the demo for what turned out to be her first single. And I thought, well, this is even better. Let's immediately record this song. And then we recorded that song and released it, and it went pretty well. What was fun about working with her, I mean, me and Emilija became very good friends because we really got along just as people when we started working together. And of course, it's always more fun to work with someone that, if you share the same humor or whatever. But what was also interesting about her was that when I did that thing that as I mentioned earlier, that I usually ask people to show me what they're listening to and what type of music they're into and so on. It turned out that we were listening to a lot of the same music, even though we're from two different generations. And so it was actually very easy to find out the sounds that we should use and the type of production choices to make. She was very specific about what she wanted, and she was very active in selecting those sounds. And again, as I said before, I always like when people have a clear vision of what they're looking for. Or sometimes they don't even have to have a clear vision of what they're looking for, but when I show them something, if they know that this is what they want or this is what they don't want, it's always much easier to find something that, gives them their own identity. Like crucial features, I approached myself. With Emilija, I wrote to her because Džiugas sent it to me, but Taught with Us wrote to me, let's say. And
but I assume a lot of people write to you.
Yeah, they do.
So how did you decide which ones are you working with?
I need to get along with them, and I need to think that I can give them what they are looking for. So first of all, I don't want to work with someone whose company I don't enjoy, because we're going to spend days or sometimes even weeks in the studio together. And so I just don't want to do that with someone I don't like, or if they don't like me, let's say. That's the criteria number one. The second criteria is that they have to, when I understand what they're looking for, if I think that I cannot give them that, or if I think that it's not realistic to achieve what they want under those circumstances that we have, then I will also say no to that. And that could be either that in general, what they want to do is just not going to be possible with the material that they have, or that I can hear that if it's a band, for example, and they say that, yeah, we want to sound like this, but then when I listen to what they actually sound like, and it just isn't where they want it to be, I will tell them that we're not going to make you sound as good as that right now. So I suggest that you spend the next 6 months just practicing, or the next year practicing, and then we can record. And if you want to do it right now, go ahead and do it. But I don't want to do it because I'm not going to be able to give you what you think I can give you. So I need to feel like I can actually do what they want. And then, of course, if I like the music, then that's fantastic. But I don't need every artist I work with to be my favorite artist musically. As long as I enjoy their company in the process, and as long as they walk out of here with a result that they are happy with. I don't think it's realistic to only work with music that you like. Now, I am fortunate enough that I mostly work with music that I really do enjoy. But even when it's music that I wouldn't necessarily listen to in the car if I wasn't the one producing it, there's still so much of a challenge in producing music, and so much of a fun challenge in producing music and making it sound good and making it sound the way the artist wants, that it's still like a very enjoyable process for me. If I absolutely hate the music, I probably wouldn't produce it either. But that is not the case. The type of artists whose music I actively dislike, they tend to not write to me in the first place.
Yeah. What music would that be?
Well, there's a specific type of pop music that for me sounds very Eastern European. It's the kind of music that whenever we've been traveling somewhere with Rasa and then we come back to Vilnius and we get into a taxi, it's usually this type of music that you hear on the radio in the taxi. I don't know how to describe it exactly, but it has this very Eastern European cheap pop sound to it, which I really don't like.
Interesting. Which I guess means Russian.
I mean, maybe. I wouldn't know, but for me, there's this specific type of chord progressions. It's this specific type of drum beat that all of those songs have, and I just really don't like it.
Okay.
It would be an interesting challenge to produce a song like that, I guess, but I think the artists who make that type of music, they're not gonna, they tend to not crowd my inbox, so I don't have to make that decision.
Yeah. Couple of artists we didn't talk about, who I guess the most popular names is Justinas Jarutis and Monique Funzute.
Yeah.
I know that you recorded their song together.
Yeah, that's how I met Monique, actually.
Okay.
Justinas, of course, I met Justinas because he reached out to me to produce Freaks on Floor.
Yeah.
And I produced 2 albums with Freaks on Floor, and then he wanted to do a solo album. And I ended up producing that too.
Okay.
So I produced his first solo album, and then when we did that first solo album, he did the duet, like a collab with Monique, and that's how I got to know her. And 7 years later, I produced her EP. So yeah, that's how that went. But with Justinas, I think he was really fed up with doing the whole rock thing with Freaks on Floor, and he wanted to do something quite different. I remember that he said that he wanted the songs that he wanted to release some songs that were really quite pop, and he wanted to go in that direction. But then when he actually showed me the songs, they all sounded like country songs, more or less. And so I remember we had a bit of back and forth discussing the direction of the songs, because for me it felt like the songs that he had written, they wanted to go in a specific direction, and then we ended up trying that direction, and it went pretty well. I think that I don't know if he would call it an album or if he would call it an EP, because it's like 6 or 7 songs on it, I think.
Yeah.
But it was a very interesting experience recording it. I liked the songs, and it was very different from what he did with Freaks on Floor. So yeah, that was. I just remember that being I remember we recorded very quickly, and I think he was a bit surprised with how it turned out, because I think it was it was very different from what he did with Freaks on Floor, but in a very different way than he imagined that it would be different, if that makes sense.
Tell me your story about your glory. It has been secret for so many years and it has to be so good. Tell me your story about your glory. It has been secret for so many years and it has to be so good.
And to me, it doesn't sound like a country album, but one of the most popular songs from that album was this song that he did with Monica, which turned out to be completely be a country song. And like, I remember when he made it, he was quite worried that this is going to be too country, but then he ended up using those alligator boots in the video. So I guess he embraced it eventually.
Yeah, and Monica's album is just I think it's one of the best illustrations of the work in this studio to the music that she was doing earlier. It's just that it was almost hard to believe that, hey, this is the same artist. Like it was in a completely different universe. And I did an interview with her. She was really happy about this process. And I feel like she kind of embodies a lot of philosophy that you wanted to share with the artist. How did it look from your perspective as a producer?
Well, I've been friends with Monica for a long time, and I have known what she's capable of as a songwriter for a very long time. And it has always frustrated me watching her from the side that she has been perceived as this, kind of manufactured pop artist when I always knew what she was capable of doing. And she has already spoken a little bit about her own personal experience, how she has worked before and so on. But essentially, when she was finally free to do what she wanted to do, I was very, very happy to be able to help her to get to that point, to take her music to that place where she wanted to take it without any restrictions. And I'm very happy with how that EP turned out. It was like again, as I said earlier, when people write songs that are that good, it's just a joy working with them. And I will again use this same word, that you don't feel like you have to improve the song. You just feel like, you need to just, you need to take the song and put it into like a beautiful environment where it belongs, and that's it. And that's always a very fun process when you have such good raw materials to work with. I understand that to someone who has only heard her music as it was when she won X Factor and all that stuff, and then when you put that next to the EP I did with her, it sounds very different. But since I have heard her song ideas and everything throughout these years of knowing her, song ideas that were not released and so on, I've always known that this is what she actually does, or what she actually can do. And more than anything else, I'm just extremely happy that she was finally able to show that to people. Yeah. And And I also think that for me, she's a very good example of someone who now has the courage to do what she wants to do, even though in many ways it's going to be harder for her than it was before. Because, you know, she had a very big platform as an artist, and it would be easy for her to just continue using that platform and making the same music and make a living from that. But instead she chose to reset her career completely and start all the way from scratch so that she could do what felt, you know, more real to her.
Yeah.
And I think that's a brave choice. And I'm really proud of her for doing that.
Yeah.
And I'm proud of the music, of course, but the fact that she made that decision, I think is it's extremely important. And I hope that other artists would follow that example, because there are many, I'm sure that there are many more artists, well, anywhere, but especially in Lithuania, who have a lot more potential that they, for whatever reason, are not realizing, you know, because they're scared to do something that might be less popular, or, you know, they're scared to step away from the image they already have, and so on. And I think that we will see in a few years, but I think she might have opened a door there that other people might go through later.
We briefly talk about a lot of artists now. I'm looking at the wall here at the entrance to the studio, and there's
scalps. That's where I keep their
there's
scalps.
This collection of these, I think it's like Insta photos.
They're Polaroids.
Yeah, where I assume it's the artists you worked together in the studio.
It's the artists that I remembered to take a picture of, or the artists that were here when I actually had film in the camera. So this is like this is quite a random collection of who was here, but these are all people that I worked with. And when I remember, I try to take pictures of people when we finish a project, an album or a single or whatever.
I mean, it's a very hard task to just choose some people and not the others, but are there some artists that embody these ideas that you want to achieve as a producer, that we should talk about them? Maybe there are some behind the scenes stories that illustrate some bigger trends that about changes in Lithuanian music that we can talk about.
I'm not sure I understand exactly what you mean.
Basically, I want to feature more of these people, and I want now you to choose who we should be talking about.
I really, really enjoyed working with Vaida, who is up there somewhere. I really liked working with her because she had so many ideas that were totally different than what I would imagine that we would put into a song. You know which Vaida I'm talking about? Vaida Deksnytė, who she was. Yeah. So essentially what happened with her was that Monique contacted me, and she said that she has an artist in this Lietuvos Balsas that is it's like on her, it's basically her artist that she's gonna take to the finals. And she had written a song for Vaida, and she wanted me to produce it. And so I produced that song, and in the process of producing that song, me and Vaida talked a lot about music, and in general, she wanted to work with me. She said she wanted to make her own music with me. And so we set about making her first single, and she only had fragments of ideas, but what she had very strongly was all these she had all these concepts of what she wanted to put into the song, and I remember that she would tell me that, okay, I want these types of 60s crazy psychedelic drums, and I want those Tarantino. I remember she used the word, like, she wanted these Tarantino guitars, and she wanted key changes and tempo changes, and she wanted like electronic. Basically, she wanted everything in one song. And I remember thinking, like, my immediate instinct was like, oh no. How am I going to explain to her that we're not going to be able to put all this into one song? But then I thought, okay, this is a very sort of that's a very conservative way of thinking about it. And I thought, okay, she was 18 years old at that time, and I remember thinking, okay, she's 18, she's clearly very creative, she has all these ideas. Why don't we try? So we tried, and we made this song that was essentially like this song that has everything in it, and it turned out really cool. And I'm really happy that we went with her ideas, and that I didn't convince her to be a bit less ambitious, but that we actually just did it. And I really loved making that song. And then we made one more single, and now she's currently writing loads of songs that she's sending to me, and we're going to make more music with her in the future. So she's an artist that I think is very interesting, because she has so many, she approaches songwriting, and in general, she approaches everything completely differently from other artists that I worked with. It's like she has this collage in her head of things that she wants, and then she writes on top of that. And if you've heard that song that we did, that Netiqueta, it's called, the first song that I did with her, it's really quite different.
Yeah, Vaida is very unique, and I remember her song with Džiugas on his album.
Yeah, that was also a very interesting experience.
Yeah, it reminded me somehow of Kate Bush, maybe, and there were a lot of other influences. Yeah,
I feel like Kate Bush is one of those artists that, you know, usually if you're a singer or a songwriter or whatever, most people don't like to be compared to others. But I feel yeah, exactly. I feel like Kate Bush is one of those select few artists that it's always a compliment to be compared to her. Yeah. Like, no one's offended to be compared to Kate Bush.
Yeah. Any more stories you want to share?
I mean, point at a picture and I'll tell you a story.
Justa, do you have your favorite? Because I cannot really. Oh yeah.
That quiet voice you're hearing is from Justinas Jarutis. Justa is a photographer. She's taking photos from this recording session. You can see them at Nara.lt and our Instagram page. Also, Justa is a great video maker. Check out her video work for YMIR audio artists.
Gabia actually, I think she contacted me because I produced Angelou, and she wanted to do, like, you know, she wrote to me and she said, "Hi, I'm a singer. I want to make R&B, blah, blah." So we made a couple of songs together. And with Gabia, I always felt that how she is as a person is very different from what she was showing in her music. Mm-hmm. And last year, we released a single with her that I think was much closer to how she actually is as a person than what she has been showing in her previous songs. But we had one moment when we filmed the video for that song. Gabi, I think she had been drinking a lot of coffee or something, but she was really hyped up. And then we were used to put on some music just to to get the mood up for the video. And Gabi started dancing around and rapping and improvising and doing all this stuff that was very sort of in your face and very different from the actual music that she's doing. And I remember thinking, this is how she is. This is how she is. When you're driving somewhere with Gabi, for example, then she's always listening to super loud music in the car and, waving her arms around and singing along loudly. But then as soon as, she writes a song, then it's this calm, and it's like she was containing herself when she was writing a song because she didn't want to be too much. And so I feel like in my head it sort of clicked when I saw her just dancing around in the studio and doing this. I don't remember what we were listening to. I think it was I think it was Nicki Minaj, that one song. Yeah, it was Nicki Minaj. And I thought, that's who she is. That's what she actually, this is actually Gabi when she thinks no one is looking, let's say. And so for her newest song, we tried to capture more of that energy, how she actually performs and everything. And I remember using I remember when she was, I made a beat and then, I made a beat with her, let's say, and then I encouraged her to just try to improvise on top of it. And at first she was very calm and everything, but then I said, try to just put yourself in that mindset that you had when you were listening to that Nicki Minaj song or whatever it was. And then she did, and that's how she wrote that Galima, that newest single that she released, which I think is really cool. And I think that in that video and in that song, I feel like she finally managed to find herself, or rather, she managed to show herself as she is, as a person and as an artist. And that was really fun to see her just travel towards that through the songs that we did.
Man sako, sustok taip daryti negalima, bet man galima. Man sako, sustok taip sakyti negalima, bet man galima. Viena aš rami naktim pakylu, niekas tamsoje manęs nelydi, apie juos rašau, nes jie pavydi, gal sakau, palik mane ramybė. Vėjas ten baisus, griaudėja lietus, man to nebetruks, manęs ten nebus. Bekiam, neskai, kometa, ryškiai, akinam tave.
I really like that song. It has that in your face energy, and I feel like we don't have that.
No,
we don't have that energy a lot in the music scene here, especially. It seems that everyone wants to be very kind of dreamy, calmly. I think maybe it's a Garbanotas influence, but Garbanotas are actually, even though they have that kind of calm vibe, there's lots of depth, not death.
There's also death in Garbanotas' songs if you just look a bit closer.
But I think it's very easy to have that kind of aesthetic and to be I'm dreamy, I'm very and be just boring basically. Yeah. And I think a lot of artists end up being boring when they are afraid of being what they actually want to be.
Yeah, well, I think first of all, a lot of female artists are afraid of being too much. They don't want to be obnoxious. They don't want to be not pretty. And, I think that they're afraid to seem aggressive or in any way, just, they're too careful, basically. I think this is partially a cultural thing, because this is still a very conservative country.
Is it?
Well, when it comes to gender roles, it's quite a conservative country.
I think that's the thing, definitely.
And I think it's also, a product of people tending to write songs at home with headphones on their laptop. And then naturally they don't sit and scream, they do something that is quiet and dreamy, and then they layer their vocals and, put loads of reverb on it. So I think that's a big part of it. And I think, if you look at the artists that I worked with that are more aggressive, they are like Crucial Features or, something like Frank Fitz or Norwegian Pioneers, those bands, they would write songs. Maybe they wrote riffs at home, but they would piece together the songs in the rehearsal room where everything was really loud, and then you get a different energy. And if you sit and write a song, as I said, at home at night with headphones, it's very easy to fall into that slow and dreamy kind of trap.
Talking about the world outside of this door, I feel like it's very different. And I'm curious what you think about it, because as we talked before, there are some elements of Lithuanian music scene that are very strong. Like when people talk about music in Lithuania, there's certain like things that they refer to. So of course it's Eurovision. People take it very, very seriously. There's also Mama Awards that in the recent 10 years or how they almost like when you came to Lithuania, Mama Awards started. It's not connected, these two. No. And there's also events like Muzikos Salė, for example, a new initiative, I think very successfully growing up. There are other studios. There are other people producing music as well. So basically, how do you see that outside world? Because what you're creating here, you can have your own rules, you can have your own little world here. But talking about the bigger music scene, as someone who is still like an observer of things, even though you became one of us, but you still have an outsider's view. Curious, how do you see all these elements, and where are we going? What are some things that are still almost like set in stone and they are not moving? What do you see?
I think that a lot of artists here are still quite nervous. They're scared to do exactly what they want to do. I don't think that's necessarily unique to Lithuania. I think that a lot of artists are afraid of doing what they want to do, but I think that the general artistic temperament is to be anxious about not being good enough, and being anxious about, not being liked or not being loved for what you do. And I think that when that is combined with this Lithuanian anxiousness, let's call it, where, you have to be in a certain way and you have to do certain things at certain stages in your life, and there's a lot of pressure to fit in. At least this is what people tell me. I didn't grow up here, but these are the stories that I'm being told. I think that still creates, to a certain degree, an environment where I think there's still quite a lot of people out there who they don't do what they want to do creatively, or they don't do it till the end because they're afraid of how others are going to react to it, or they're afraid that it's not going to sell enough, and so on and so on. And I think that this is getting better, obviously. It's much better than it was, but there's still a lot of it. And I don't know exactly why this is so... why this fear will not die, but I think that part of it comes from like a different one quite big cultural difference between Lithuania, and I'm sure this is true for the neighboring countries of Lithuania too. One thing that is a big difference between Lithuania and the Scandinavian countries and Norway, which is where I'm from, is that there's much more of there's a much stronger pressure from the family here, it seems, to do certain things or to not do certain things.
Okay.
And it seems like young people here, they spend way more time with their family, or like going to the village or listening to their grandma or whatever, than Norwegians do. Now, I'm not saying that you shouldn't spend time with your family. Of course, that's not what I'm saying. But I'm just saying that because a lot of people here, they seem to have parents that are very, let's say, worried,
Yeah.
or grandparents that are very worried or conservative or whatever you want to call it. A lot of younger people here, they seem like they have one foot in this European mentality of like, let's do something, let's do our own thing. But then they're keep being pulled back into this a bit old-fashioned sort of like, no, you have to be a lawyer, you have to be you have to do something, you have to have a diploma, no matter what, you have to have a diploma. You have to buy a house, you cannot rent an apartment, that is outrageous, you must own it. Doesn't matter if the apartment is somewhere you don't want to live, you have to buy it, and you have to go to the village every weekend so that your grandma can tell you that you're fat. You know what I mean? Like there's a lot of those types of, there's a lot of these small anxiety-inducing things that young people here seem to be exposed to a lot more than what I'm used to from Norway, let's say. And I think that, as I said, when you combine that with this general nervousness that most creative people have, I think that probably slows down the process of people being brave enough to do exactly what they want to do. Now, again, I'm not saying that it is like that for everybody. Yeah. But I can only say that throughout the years that I've lived here and through like listening to younger people tell me, what they are worried about and why they do or why they don't do certain things musically or career-wise, I keep hearing the same sort of like, yeah, but my dad says that I have to, or my mom says that I have to, or my grandma says that I should, something. There seems to be a lot of family pressure. And of course, then I know that loads of people have very supportive parents, but there seems to be quite a lot of those old school parents here too, who are just like, drumming is not a real job.
Yeah, maybe, for example, when I go to visit my grandma, I feel like the world that her world is just so different than my world. Not just because we are from different generation, not only because of that, but just like Lithuania as a country is a very different country. Like she grew up like in the village during the Soviet days. Now I live in Vilnius. Even the fact that you can study in Vilnius, a capital, for a lot of people who are not from here, and a lot of people who live in Vilnius didn't grow up here. It's a big thing, and maybe I assume that in Norway your grandparents can have. They are basically the way they grew up, the quality of life that they had is more similar to what you have. And maybe you don't feel the pressure to somehow, it's almost like a guilt of having a good life because you know that your grandparents couldn't really have it. So you, in my case, I love my grandma and I like to visit her, but maybe I definitely understand that people feel that they have to do it, not out of because they want to, but because there's some kind of sense of guilt.
Well, yeah, I don't want to, say something that isn't true about how it is to be Lithuanian, because I'm not Lithuanian, but it seems like there's a general tendency here that you have to do things. As you just said now, you have to do certain things, and if you don't, you feel guilty. Yeah. And that if someone tells you something, someone who is older than you and is in your family, you regardless of how ridiculous what they say might be, you still need to pay attention to it because they are your parents and because they fed you. Yeah. You know what I mean? Like there's this, we raised you and we gave you food so you didn't die, and therefore now you have to listen to us even when we say things that are completely mad, and this for me is quite different from what I'm used to, let's say. Now, of course, I understand that in, again, Norway, of course, my parents grew up in different times than I did, and their parents grew up in different times than they did, but that's how it has been throughout history. Like everyone, things change gradually, but here things changed radically from one generation to the next. Yeah. So you have this sort of rip in the timeline where your parents' generation and your grandparents, they are left on this cliff while you are floating into the ocean of Europe.
Yeah.
And, the distance between you and your parents' generation is much bigger than the distance between me and my parents' generation. And then when you combine that with this tradition that you have to listen to your elders a lot more than we do in Norway, I think that creates a lot of friction and a lot of anxiety, let's say.
Yeah, and what I noticed, for example, it seems that music here is like young people's business, and like my parents' generation just don't go to music shows.
Or they will go to like one show a year, which is like an arena concert with some sort of older artist that they knew from before.
And I think there are very few older artists from Lithuania that young people like can feel proud of. Usually you don't. You see the bands from like the pop artists from the 90s. Let's say few people would like to go to their shows. It's like there's this gap. It's almost we're creating new music culture from scratch instead of having continuation from different generation. Yeah,
well, I think a lot of young people here, especially because of what we just talked about, they are quite preoccupied to, well, it seems to me like there's this a little bit of a, older people here seem to think that young people are stupid. And young people here seem to think that older people are stupid.
Yeah.
And there's not that much mutual respect, let's say, between the generation, like between different generations. And it seems like there's a lot of, I think a lot of course, young people always want to build an identity that is uniquely their own. And part of that identity building exercise is to distance themselves from their parents' generation and so on. But that impulse seems to be quite a lot stronger here. And the arenas that are for young people and the arenas that are for older people, they seem to be a lot more separate here. And in general, my extremely unscientific observation about identity in Lithuania, and this is quite relevant to the music industry also, is that it seems like a lot of people here are as preoccupied with what they don't want to be as they are with what they do want to be. And I get this a lot when I get artists into the studio. If they don't have a very clear idea about their music already, and we start talking about what they want to do, they will very often rather tell me what they don't want. They will be like, well, we definitely don't want to be like this, or we don't want to sound like that, or we don't want to look like this band or that artist or this singer.
Yeah.
They're a lot of subcultures or a lot of, well, different identities here seem to be a lot about what you are not.
Yeah.
It's like a protest against something, against another group or another generation or something.
Interesting.
Yeah, that is interesting for me. So it often starts from that side rather from the opposite side of like, this is who I am. It's more like, this is what I am not, or this is who I am not.
This is very, I think this goes very like straight to like, definitely bigger point than just about the music scene. I feel like when you think about Lithuania, like what is Lithuania? What is a Lithuanian identity? I think it's based on a lot of things that people want to escape from. Like, we are not Russia.
Yeah. So this I hear a lot, and we are not Eastern Europe. Like, but I think it has a lot to do with the choices that you think you're presented with when you're younger. Because like, if you are a young man in a high school in a village in Lithuania, and your goal is and your choice is basically either to be interested in cars and basketball, or to just be a freak because you're interested in art instead.
Yeah. Then
naturally you're going to feel pretty strong about that identity as a different person, and you're going to want to distance yourself as much as possible from, you know, the basketball crowd. Because, you know, you don't feel like you have another option, you know, you feel like you have to be like them, or you have to be like completely different, because otherwise you have no place. Now, again, as I'm saying, this is not a scientific observation in any way, but this is a tendency that I cannot deny that a lot of people say this to me. They're very preoccupied with not being something.
Yeah.
And that's something that I had never thought of until I moved here. Like I had never heard people be so preoccupied with that. You know, I remember being 14 years old and not wanting to be like, you know, my parents or whatever, but that's like a phase that you go through when you're younger. But here it seems like that phase lasts quite a bit longer because there's so many things you don't want to be like.
Yeah. So maybe that's the...
I think also the fact that, for example, so many young people here now, of course, when it comes to song lyrics and everything, people really want to sing in Lithuanian, which I think is a great thing.
Yeah.
But young people here, at least this is what I'm observing, they use a lot of English language.
When they speak?
Yeah, they use so many English words, and they use like half the sentence is English, half is Lithuanian.
Yeah.
And in Norway, it is not like that. Like my niece, for example, is 19 years old, and she does not do that with her friends. They speak Norwegian.
Okay.
And Lithuanians speak a lot of English. And I'm just guessing here, but I'm imagining that this can also have something to do with this fact that they want to escape from this perception of Lithuanianness, you know, this like that they want to be more Western, and they want to be more Western right now. They don't have any time to lose.
Yeah, or they talk about things that Lithuanian languages don't have a vocabulary for. And I guess music is one of those things. But I agree that, it's an interesting phenomenon. So maybe that's a nice conclusion to like a whole long conversation, that what's happening here in the studio is that kind of going from that negative mindset to more like to be more of yourself, building positive kind of personality, and an artist that is for something, not only against something. Would that be too much to say that? Or
I mean, I don't know, because I cannot really say. I think you would have to ask the people that I've worked with how they feel that the experience is. I can only say that I try to, as much as possible, encourage the people I work with to do what they want to do, and to follow their instincts, and to follow their impulses, and not to doubt themselves.
But I bet a lot of people would tell you that they actually don't know what they want to do.
Yeah, and that is, of course, the challenge. It's because how do you help someone to achieve something that they want to do if they don't know it themselves? Because then it's very easy to start telling them what they want, and then it's not theirs anymore. So sometimes when people absolutely don't know what they want, I will just tell them, okay, come back when you do know what you want. Sometimes they say that they don't know what they want, but I feel like I can see what they actually want to do, but they're just afraid to do that thing, you know? And sometimes finding out what they want to do is more an exercise of choosing between different options that they have floating around in their head, and then you help them to narrow those down.
Yeah.
I tend to try to draw the line at actively giving ideas to people. I'm not talking about musical ideas, but when it comes more to like, who do you think, like if someone asks me like, what do you think we should do next, or what direction do you think we should take next, or what do you think this song should be, or who am I as an artist, I of course I'm interested in discussing that with people, but I don't want to tell them what they should do or who they are, because then it just comes from a person that they perceive as having authority, and then they're just going to do that. And that's exactly what they've been doing in school or at home, you know, just listening to other people. And I don't want to be another one of those people.
Yeah.
I mean, I might say something that makes sense to them, but it's still not theirs.
One last thing I want to ask you. You stays here, she's taking photos.
Yes.
But we're not, in none of these photos, we're going to see your face.
That is true.
Which is interesting because
it's such a beautiful face.
because it's a beautiful face.
It is a very beautiful face.
And it's rare. I mean, in these days, we see everyone's faces.
Yeah.
And you working with artists who are some of these artists are very public people.
Yes.
You're not. Why?
I am not. Because I think that it's a privilege not to be. I see very little value in being a public person. I understand that when you are an artist and your face is part of what you're trying to promote or trying to sell, let's say, you have to show your face. But I don't. I don't have to show it, and therefore I am very happy not to. I think that the more anonymous I am as a person, the more useful I am as a producer, because the more I sound like, it's like when you're an actor. Like if you are a bad guy in one or two very popular movies, you're never going to be a hero in any other movies after that. You know, when you're being typecast as something, then you end up doing the same thing over and over again. And so I think that the more anonymous I am as a person, the more flexible I can be as a producer, because people will judge me not based on how they see me or like, you know, looking at me and thinking, oh, he makes that music or he makes that music. They will just have to judge me by my music. And of course, on top of that, I also think that social media is a disease, and I think I would never want to share my picture all over social media, because I don't understand the value of it. I think it's a bad thing rather than a good thing. So yeah, those two things combined, really, it's a general dislike for social media and for just people sticking their faces everywhere for no reason, and the fact that as a producer, it's better for me to be as neutral as possible.
Were there cases when an artist came to your studio and saw you in person
and screamed and ran off? No one really.
No one ran away.
No one ran away. And the ones that did, no one ran away. I think that it's just, I genuinely think that the more, well, this goes back to production again, but the less I insert of myself and my own personality into an artist's music, the better it is for the artist and the better it is for me. Because I think that being known for like one sound or one thing is not in general very useful. And I think that the more people associate you and your face and your physical, presence with your work, the less flexible you are. I think so. And that's why I choose to just stay anonymous as much as it is possible anyway.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Well, Vilnius is not big.
No.
People can find you if they want
I'm
to.
sure they can find me.
Yeah.
If they think that's something worth spending time on, then they're welcome.
We've been talking for 3 hours, I think.
Yeah, wonderful.
Which I really appreciate. Do you feel like there's something I haven't asked you about that you wanted to share?
Not really, no. I think I'm just here to answer whatever questions you may have. It's up to you to decide what you think it is interesting to hear about.
I think let's stop because I have questions, but then there are. But I mean, we may continue this the next time. Maybe we can have listeners' questions as well. But yeah, I feel like with this interview, I wanted to kind of show the philosophy to understand more about the philosophy that you have as a producer, and kind of give a tribute to the studio that for me as a music fan, it just gave me a lot of music that I enjoyed, and I met lots of these people that we talked about. I became friends with them, or I'm happy to see them on stage or just meet in the city. I feel like it's a very, very like strong community that you your decision coming here from Liverpool, building studio here, it resulted in this community existing. So I want to say thank you for making that decision.
Well, thank you very much for saying that. That's very nice of you. And thank you for asking these questions.
Of course. And thank you for so much of your time. Really, really appreciate that.
No worries at all.
That is our show today. You heard an interview with Snorre Bergerud, artist and producer, founder of YMIR Audio Recording Studio here in Vilnius. It was the first episode of the new scene, or Nauja, scena, a new podcast series from Nara Collective. If you like the podcast, please tell about it to your friends and please subscribe to it on your favorite podcast app. I'm also very curious to hear your feedback. What thoughts came to your mind as you were listening? You can write me an email at karolis@nara.lt or just send me a direct message on any of the social networks. I'm very curious to hear it. My inbox is always open. We are going to release new episodes every couple of weeks, and we are able to do that because of the support by Medijų Rėmimo Fondas, or Lithuanian Media Support Fund. Our theme music, the one you're hearing right now, is created by Kata Bitoft. Our sound engineer is Adomas Zubė. My voice is being recorded at Martynas Mažvydas National Library at the recording studio here. The sound engineer here is Justinas Jarutis. My name is Karolis Vyšniauskas. Thank you for being with us. See you in a couple of weeks.